Hey, I'm Vicky, and this is the Just Be Better podcast where we explore the endless possibilities of professional growth, learning, and excellence. Join our comprehensive interviews and engaging discussions where our guests share not just their successes, but the real, raw stories of their professional and personal development. I would like to welcome our guest today, an incredibly talented HR manager, a professional dancer, and just overall incredible person, Vismaya Wilson. Welcome to the show, Vismaya.
Hello, I'm so excited to join you on this.
I'm very excited to have you. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. Introduce yourself to our audience.
I'm Vismaya. A lot of people call me Vis. I'm currently working, as Vicky said, as a HR manager for a marketing company that's US based called On24 Limited. Prior to that, I've worked different roles, worn different hats, and it's been an interesting journey for me. I've been in recruitment consultancy background. I've been in operational sales side of the business. I've done internal recruitment. I, as a hobby, dance, as Vicky has said, not so professional, but she's very kind. I do dance for a time pass, and also I'm fairly integrated and close to my family and my community. I'm from an Indian background, so that's also an important sort of part of me. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's a whole sort of background about me.
You've just touched on working in quite a few different roles over your career. Tell us a little bit more about the path, how you ended up in your roles, and how did you ended up being an HR manager? What was the journey for you?
It was a very strange one looking back at it. So, by degree, I did psychology at University of Hertfordshire. And upon sort of finishing my degree, as with most people, I had no clue what I wanted to go into. I mean, I really did want to stick to psychology. I'm somebody who enjoys speaking to people, and sort of making a difference and helping people in any small or big way as I can. So that's why I really wanted to pursue a career in psychology. But I'm not sure if a lot of people are aware of this, but being a psychologist, a practicing psychologist, is a tough field to sort of get into. For me personally, I was someone who was very driven about, I want to get things done, I want to learn things. And I think very similar to you, Vicky, I was just going through a list of, I just went on my laptop and I was like, graduate roles, like any graduate roles. And I applied to absolutely everything from Virgin Media to Amazon to consultancies to loads of different things in social services, etc. Just to, I think it's really difficult when you're a student and when you've not had that in work experience to kind of then decide, oh, this is definitely what I want to do, unless you do a path like a doctorate or a doctor or something where it's like, okay, this is what I'll end up doing. But if your degree is a lot more diverse, it's sort of hard to pinpoint exactly where you will end up. So I just searched up on it, and then recruitment consultant is something that came up. I was a graduate recruitment consultant, and I had no idea. I read the job spec and I was like, oh, you can make money. Literally, you can make quite a bit of money. And as you guys will soon realize, I like to talk a lot. So it was also like, it's a lot of relationship building exercise as well as a 360 consultant. So I was like, two things I do enjoy and I would probably won't regret initially. So I just jumped into it, and I would say, like, until I started the job and started getting trained on the job, I had no idea what that role entailed. So there was a lot of the time, as a recruitment consultant, as most of you would know, there's a lot of no's you get, and it's, you have to be thick skinned. You have to be thick skinned and resilient to be like, okay, don't take it personally. It's not you. It's just how the industry works. So there was a lot of times, and I was speaking to my cousin about this yesterday. I was like, people don't know this, but there was a lot of tears. There was a lot of, days where I was like beating myself up about it, thinking, why am I not getting this? Why am I not getting that? And I think the most important thing is just to keep going and to like not lose hope in yourself and not to take things personally. So that's what I did for the first year and a half of my sort of initial professional
Mm-hmm.
career. Unfortunately, I was one of the victims of COVID. So when the lockdown happened and the pandemic hit, the business, obviously, as with all businesses, they were making cuts. And the easiest decision for the company I was working with at the time was to make cuts with the graduates that they had just brought on. So uh, it was tough. And I don't know why I was very like, I think I had a few friends of mine that were like, devastated. I was devastated for sure. I was devastated, but I was placed on furlough, so I was like, I'm gonna get paid for doing nothing for a bit. So, so I was like, that's positives, and I think it's really important when you're going through things in life just to take it quite lighthearted and also to remember that maybe that's not the part that's meant for you and maybe something
Mm-hmm.
better's coming next. And that's when I started dancing. I was like, I want to do something and focus on something that excites me, that interests me, that makes me happy. Obviously, in the meantime, I was applying for jobs. And at the time, I thought, okay, a recruitment consultant, I've got an experience of being sort of hardcore sales recruitment. What can I go into? So I started looking at sort of recruitment sales or any sort of recruitment roles just to continue on that trajectory because that was what I was sort of trained on a little bit. And I ended up at our company together. I got a role as a recruiter is the job description, but it was more of a sales recruiter. It's not an internal recruiter, it's not a consultant. It was more of like an operational recruiter. So recruiting carers into the health industry and the company that we were both working for. I found that quite exciting initially because it was like a good balance of hunting people. You were still given targets and I like being target driven, so there was that element, but also it was quite slower in comparison to sort of, I wasn't going after the clients. It was just half of that 360 recruitment job that I was initially doing. So I really enjoyed it. And I feel like I came in and I was like, oh, this is easy. And I think 6 months into the job, I was speaking to my manager and I was like, I'm sort of getting bored, is what I said. I was like, I am someone who likes to learn things and challenge myself a little bit. So I told her, I was like, I'm not saying I want to leave or anything, but like, I'm just getting bored. So, like, if you can pull me in on different projects or pull me in on different things, I'd love that. And then it so happened that an opportunity arose in our team for like a team lead position. I gave it a go. I didn't think, I'll be very honest, I didn't think I would get it. Like, I really didn't think I would get it. And I just went for it because I was like, what's the worst that can happen? You get a good experience in sort of interviewing. And I think a lot of people talk themselves out of going for the next step or the next role because they're like, oh, can I do it? Is that I have no experience, or I'm from this background, no one will take me seriously. Yeah, like I just went for it. And I was having a feedback call with my manager at the time, and I was like going into the call like this, just get yourself together, she's gonna say no. And then she was like, we'd love to offer you the role. And I was like, what? I was like in pure disbelief, but also I think I cried. Not in that call, after that call. Not I genuinely cried because I was like also proud of myself for not giving up, because I feel like at that time I was going through a bit of a hard time with the team I was working with, and I didn't really have the best support system around me that was encouraging. So everything that I did, I was sort of pushing through myself, but also my manager was great at the time, and she was also pushing me and telling me, no, give it a go, give it a go. And I feel like I was thrown into the deep end because after a couple of months, unfortunately, my manager left the business, and I didn't really have a manager to look up to.
I think that's
Go
the
on, go.
beauty of a startup, that you never know what to expect. Like one day you have the supportive circle around you, and next day half of the team's gone, and you're like, how does this happen? Like where is everyone?
It is daunting. It was scary. A lot of times I was really questioning, is this for me? And what helped me at the time, and not because this is your podcast, but what really did help me at the time was that we had a mentorships at the business, and you were my mentor, and there was a lot of straightforward conversations we had that kept me going. That kept
When I
me
think about
going.
it, and like I went through official coaching training recently, and working towards my ICF, and when I think about the way I used to coach and I used to mentor, it's like I was a very harsh mentor. You know, it's like I'm not sure if everything I've done was definitely right. Hopefully it didn't harm anyone, but it's like I'm definitely a very straightforward person.
Well, you've got a good product in me out of it, so I would say it worked. But yeah, you were very straight to the point and very hard. I liked that. I think I liked that. I think being straight to the point and sort of not, going around the bush and stuff, beating around the bush, it's useful in some circumstances. So it really helped me at the time.
I'm very glad to hear. And I think just in general with mentorship, since we touched on that, I think mentorship is very personal thing. And I know that I had a couple of mentors and coaches that some of them were absolutely phenomenal. Others just didn't work for me and my personality. And I think it's okay. I'm a
Yeah.
little bit worried nowadays when I see all of the mentors and everything is like, oh, someone said no to you. That shouldn't happen. Let me teach you how that shouldn't happen and how to avoid that. But that's not the point, because mentorship is very personal, and you should find someone that works with you and for your values and for everything, rather than just having mentorship for the sake of clicking the box. But I've
Yeah.
distracted us from where we were.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back on people that I've had mentors as well. And yeah, there's some people that I've been like, respectfully, I'll sit in a session with you because it's necessary and I'll give it a go. And I am someone who's like, you should give it a go, because maybe different styles would be helpful in different scenarios or different situations. And it's never, I wouldn't say, judge a person by sort of like what they're like in a group setting or whatever. Because when you do sit down with, I mean, you were the HRD at the time, and I was like, oh, like, I don't know how we're going to work together. And, and we worked great together in a one-to-one sort of setting. And I found like a lot of, our sessions to be super useful and helpful in sort of getting me to the position I am today. And I'm like forever grateful for that, because you're someone that you've not met my family, but they know you. You've not met a lot of my friends, but they know you. I'm like, Vicky, and they're like, yeah. So yeah,
As you can see, I have a lot of makeup, but I'm probably blushing through the whole thing now. So thank you.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. So yeah, so no, I think mentorship where possible in careers, and I think if you're working and your company doesn't have a mentorship and or a scheme like that in place, I think recommending that is definitely beneficial. And I know from working at Elder as well, there was someone that came to me to be a mentee to me, and that I mentored. And at the time I was like, really, me mentoring someone? But I loved how we did things, and we matched people with different needs and different sort of skills together. And I remember working with her, and I think the person that I was working with at the time, she was like, how do I gain my confidence a bit more? How do I keep moving up my career or going up the ladder? How did you do it? And I think even just having conversations like that with people is, useful, and you can learn a lot from each other. And I think a simple conversation like that is super useful. But I think if there is no forum to do it, like if you can make that suggestion to your sort of management, I think 100% is useful. So I would definitely recommend that.
And when talking about your current role, what are your main responsibilities and how does your day-to-day look like?
I look after the EMEA region, so all the offices in the EMEA region. I have a lot of freedom in sort of implementing new changes, projects of all sorts in the region that I look after with the support of my manager. And he's super supportive in that sense. So there's projects I work on, there's onboarding, there's offboarding, there's management, leadership sort of coaching, there's the social side of it, the cultural piece, the engagement piece of it as well. So I think having worked in sort of a recruitment and in a HR setting in several different companies and having seen how it's implemented in several different companies, it differs like company to company. Like the role of a HR is completely different. And the extent to which you would have involvement or the extent to which you have a say is also very dependent on the sort of structure of that company itself. Like where I worked previously to this, it was quite corporate. We had shareholders in the business. So all the decisions that were sort of made for the business, I don't think HR had a say in it, which I think is a massive, massive like mistake in the industry because the HR team is the one that's also quite close to the people, and their role in itself is to look after the people, be advocates for the people, whilst also sort of, looking after the company and making sure that's aligned. But I think if there is a distance between sort of the HR department and sort of the senior management and leadership, that can be quite harmful for the business. And I feel like there are some companies right now that unfortunately operate like that, and it's tough because then it has an effect on sort of the employees, and then as a HR you have to sort of drive those changes, and you're looked at as the bad person. Like you're the one putting out all the changes for the business, you're the one saying no, this is a strict policy, or whatever it may be that we're sort of enforcing because of senior management, without really having a say to defend the people, and also not even integrating that in. So I think working for companies like that is tough. I've done that previously and it was tough, but I kept going and it was a huge learning curve for me. Right now I think I had a blank canvas from when I came in, which I really appreciated because my manager was sort of like, take reins, do what you think's good, run it by me, let's discuss. And there's so many things, like randomly I'll come month on month and be like, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we try this out? And he's like, oh, great idea. And he'll be like, share it with the my counterpart managers in APAC region and things, and they also roll out similar things. So I like the ability to do that. The worst part of the job, as I think most people would know, as a HR sort of a manager, you do need to get redundancies put through, terminations processed, and I think that's sort of the most difficult part of it. I knew that always came with the job. I knew that was something that I would need to do. And I think for someone like me, it's quite tough because I'm a people person. I truly, truly care about the employees I work with, and I would really try to find that balance. And I think the hardest thing is when you are a people person, but then you are given a directive to then terminate someone for another reason. It's tough, but you just have to do it because that's part of the job.
To this day, one of the hardest days I had in my career was at one day we had to fire 5 people, and I was the one responsible to sorting all of the process from legal standpoint, making sure that all of the documents are sorted, and I was the last person to press pause on the connections, collecting everything. And I still remember I went through all of it. And at that point, I already didn't smoke, I think, for like a year or something. I had quit before. I literally just went out of the last meeting, went outside, bought a pack of cigarettes, stood outside and just started bawling my eyes out. And one of our heads off walked out of the office, and he genuinely was terrified seeing me like that. And I was like, I can't help it. I don't know how to express this emotion. And I think, and actually, I would love to hear your thoughts on that. There's still a perception quite deeply rooted in the industry in general that the HR managers are the bad guys. They are their justifier. And what are your thoughts on that? What would you say to people who think that's what HR are there to do?
I don't agree with it at all. I think we're quite, our hands are tied in most of these situations. Like, I think what I try to tell people when um decisions like this are made as well, and I was like, let me sit you down for a second. I'll be like, let's say the company that we're at right now is your business, is your baby, it's your something you've created, something you're passionate about. Okay. And we have financial hits sometimes. All businesses do. We do have financial hits. And I was like, as a manager or as a CEO of this business, you do need to make cuts. You do need to make sort of changes to the organization at points. And I was like, when it's your own thing, you would feel completely different about it. It's because people are on the receiving end and they're like, oh, like I'm not good enough and things like that. And I think it the reason why a lot of HR managers have a bad rep when it comes to something like this is because they do just do it as an exercise, close book, and they're like, please leave the building. Like, with no justifications given, with no sort of support offered. And I know from a legal standpoint, like it there is limited things that we can do, and there's limited sort of ways in which we can smooth out that process. But I think also after that meeting, just being like, okay, that's done. And I've had situations where people have been bawling their eyes out. And I think that is the hardest thing for someone like me. And there's nothing you can do. It's not my business. It's not a exercise where we're just picking out random names and doing it. There's usually justifications for why those individuals have been picked out, whether that's for an structural organizational change or whether that's because performance related. And we're just the parties that are initiating the process. In most instances, it's that individual's own performance, or unfortunately, the business does not have that need for that role. And those are not things in our control as like HR managers. That's not something that we can control. And yeah, you're right. And I think maybe because a lot of people do lack that knowledge or awareness of like what to what extent does a HR manager sort of get involved even. And I think there is that lack of that. So we're in whatever business I work, usually something I like to do, sort of do like lunch and learns, where we educate each other about the roles that we do. All roles, back end roles, front end roles, etc. And we do sort of sessions where we will focus on what is it the other person does, and how much sort of directive and things like that. And it's interesting because a lot of people then come up with questions and they're like, oh, so do you do this, or oh, you do that, oh, I didn't know that. And it's like, yeah. And you learn a lot from each other as well. And it's not like you're seen as the bad person. So previous companies where I've worked, where the employees did know the level of involvement I've had in decisions like this, and where I've had to make those exits, there have been more of like an understanding. And at the end, they've just been like, okay, thank you, this, like, and I've been like, references come to me. Any sort of help can I help you with your next job? Can I help you with your interview skills, etc.? Let me help you. Use me. That's my strengths. Use me. And I think that's something that we can do as HR professionals to not just be so rigid and be like, bye bye, see you, good luck with your life.
I agree to that, but I also would probably challenge that, at least what came to me personally, when I invested a little bit too much of myself and I gave a little bit too much of my heart, then when I have to do these decisions and make these executions essentially of processes and everything, it ended up having a massive dawn on my mental health. And then I need to learn how to pick up. And at one point, I know I was exactly the same. And I always was like, oh, just give me as a reference to everyone. I'll introduce you to all of my network. And next thing I know, I'm doing a full-time job outside of my actual job, just helping people and supporting everyone. And then I ended up having a full burnout. So I think there's a very thin line of offering that support and genuinely helping people, but also realizing that you can help others if you're not looking after yourself. Even on the plane, you have to put a mask on yourself first if something goes wrong and then look after others. So, and I think HR managers tend to quite often spread themselves a little bit too thinly for their mental health and their support, and they're the ones that actually need it the most.
Yeah, it's tough. And I think sometimes you're right, like HR professionals do spread themselves out quite thin. And I had a few colleagues that I've worked with previously that really were like, "This, are you okay? Like, are you okay? Like, take it easy." Just because of how demanding it became for me and with how much I needed to pick up. And I think, yeah, you have to be. I think maybe because I've come from the consultant recruitment background and stuff, I've just been quite thick skinned. I can easily go up to someone and be like, no, you're out of order. And there's certain things I feel like I can do quite quickly and be done with it. It's almost like a trait in me where, as empathetic as I am, if needs to be, I can just turn the switch off and be like, no, I'm not investing into this. You're not wasting my time, which you need to be as well, or else a lot of people will start like talking all over you.
As you mentioned, hiring and firing is part of the job. And the firing normally happens for different reasons. What are your thoughts on like these massive layoffs that's currently happening?
You know what? Ultimately, the power lays in the hands of the shareholders or the sort of investors of that business. And I think it really depends on how educated they are. And if they're not educated, I think the senior sort of leadership team needs to be able to sort of rein them in, to sort of show them the pros and cons of things like that. Because you're absolutely right. Some companies just overhire and then it's like, crap, like we can't afford this. Like in the next quarter, and it's like, where do we cut? Who do we make cuts to? And there's businesses that do this on a repeating cycle. And it's like, have you not learned? My thoughts personally is I don't agree with it. And I don't even, I mean, I can easily say I don't agree with it, but that doesn't mean that, it's going to stop. Unfortunately, there are going to be quite ignorant people that are only focused on the, immediate outcome. And it could be that they immediately have a new sort of project to launch and they're like, oh, I immediately need to pull this up. Let's hire these 200 people. And then it's like, okay, but have you forecasted into the next quarter and the impact on the financials and the budget? And I feel like if you don't have the right mentors or the right group of people to sort of rein you back in to be like, okay, but this is going to be damaging for us and the company in a couple of months down the line. And don't get me wrong, sometimes you can have those group of people and they'll still choose to ignore you and they will still choose to do what they want. And I think a lot of that with previous people I've worked with, I don't know if it's right for me to say this, but a lot of people that are investors or shareholders, a lot of the majority I've seen anyway, are quite backward thinking when it comes to this. And they also like to, I don't know if it's an egoistic thing where they're like, no, it's my money. What I say goes. Irrespective of the financials you're seeing, irrespective of the advice you're getting from the people that are actually day in, day out in the business, that can actually predict a lot of things a lot better than them. And they still choose to ignore it. And I think it's really difficult. And personally, as a HR professional, I find it extremely difficult working in an environment like that. So that's something that I almost always sort of try to get a feel or sense of during sort of the interview process, or I would start researching about like, okay, but how has this been dealt with in the past? How does a company deal with situations like this? I think I'm quite lucky at the minute. My manager, because he's so experienced globally, you are going to have to make cuts. I think, as I mentioned earlier, you will make, as a business, there will be times where you would need to make cuts, and that's a given, and that's okay. And I think if you can manage that with a plan from the initial get go, that's okay. If you're now over hiring just for the sake of it, that's not okay. And so I think it's about educating people on the financial side of it and everything. And my manager, he's been so good. Like I've not seen someone work like this before. Maybe you have in your sort of more experience than me, but there's been companies where, you know, they do these constant cuts of like loads of people at once. And that has a detrimental effect on sort of the employee well-being as well as the workload, the burnout, everything just rockets high.
And the cost itself, because I think a lot of managers, especially new time managers, and as you mentioned, shareholders, I don't think they realize how costly recruitment is.
Yeah.
And it's not only from services perspective, when you look at all of the subscriptions you have to have, but it also includes all of the, if you lose the person you hire, then you have to understand that most likely going to delay your one project or another, unless that person literally haven't done anything and we're just sitting in the office. But then that's a normal laying off. But when they spread the cost, and like the cost of on average, I think the cost is about 25% of annual salary per hire that it costs to rehire someone.
Exactly. And I think that comes with experience for sure, because I think a lot of people, like I said, just focus on the immediate consequences or the immediate sort of things that they're trying to get out of it. And that has a worse sort of effect on the like cost element of it, the employee satisfaction, the company reputation goes down. Like there's a lot of things that people don't think about, and they're like, no, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. This is what we want now. Please go put it out. And I find it extremely difficult to work with people like that. And irrespective of how much, you know, knowledge is out there, how much sort of information is out there, and guidance is out there, a lot of people still choose to be blind to that and just keep repeating those kind of things. So yeah, it's difficult. I think in that perspective, like my standpoint on it is that I just would be careful with the team that I work with, and I am quite open with my management about it. If there's something like this that sort of comes up, I the first one to say, look, I don't like your approach, and if this is how you're going to continue to do, be it. I'm just not going to be part of that. Like that's and I make it crystal clear, and I'm like, I can't operate like that. And that's not sort of a characteristic or like a skill that I want to develop, because a lot of what you become and the person you become is also based around sort of the colleagues that you work with, the leadership around you. So I don't want to pick up things like that from leaders and then eventually start doing that myself. So I just, in most respectful way, remove myself from those businesses as and when I can.
On its own, it's a very powerful way to be, being able to stand for your own values and what you believe. Unfortunately, there's not that many people who think they can do that, which always saddens me, because I think everyone should be able to express if it's something detrimental, like, oh, you're going against my values. Everyone should be in an environment where they should be able to, no, that's not happening. We're not doing this. But it's still not the case on a lot of situations, which is quite annoying. Moving a little bit away from firing, one of the most common questions that I do get is, as an HR manager, you've been in recruitment for years, what advice you would give to people who are interviewing?
I'll sort of personally cover off like how I approach it. Obviously, know the business. I think basics, the basic thing that you can do and the minimum that you can do is to research the company and the role expectations. And personally, what I like to do is to get the job description out and then have another Word document or piece of paper, however you'd like to do it. And I'll read the skill requirements, the responsibilities specifically. And then I would go through each description and I would, on the adjacent paper, write ways in which I have shown this in my personal life. And it doesn't need to be in a professional setting. I think that's what a lot of people get, like, they look at a job description. Oh, I've never done that. You didn't need to do that in a professional setting. Like, I think I'm so grateful to my family and my community that my upbringing, I came from an Indian sort of community and upbringing, and our church community is huge, and they encourage us to sort of participate in leadership activities or charity work and things like that, where I pick up little different skills. And these skills you can also bring back in your interviews. There's things that you could be doing in your spare time. It could be a hobby that you're doing, that you're teaching. That's you showcasing a talent and you practicing that skill. There's always ways in which you can say, I've done something without having done it the exact same way. So I would always pick up a skill, write it. Oh, I did it like this in this situation. Not exactly, but I've managed X amount of people for a charity event. And those things matter too, because they go to show that you're not someone that, that likes to just sit and do things, check a box off. You are someone that would go out of your way, pick up new ways of doing things and integrate different skills from different environments together. So I usually, do that exercise where I would write my experiences and match it to the skill. If there's any sort of specific pointers or responsibilities that I feel like, oh, I'm actually never done that, or that's not a skill that I feel quite confidently about, research on that. What does it entail? If it's a software that you've never used before, okay, what does that software do? Like, what is the purpose of that? Why do people use it? Basics like that. And so when you're in the interview and they talk to you or ask you about your experience with it, be very open. You don't need to lie. I think that's another thing people get scared about. They're like, oh, like, but I haven't worked on that software before. Own it and say, I'll be very honest, I've never used that system before, but in the light of this interview, I had a look into it because I saw that was an important part of this role. And I've learned that this is what you do with it. And, given that I've shown, and it's something that I can easily pick up, or with the right guidance or with the right training, I'm confident in my ability to sort of use it. Or if you've used a similar system or done a similar project before, you can bring that in by saying, it's not the exact same thing, but it could be quite similar to this, or you could bring in new ideas to the interviewer as well. So there's ways in where you can approach things you've not done like that too, but being aware of that, because I think a lot of people, where they fail at interviews, is they get quite relaxed and they're like, oh, yeah, I'll just see what questions get thrown at me and stuff. No, do your research. Our generation and going forward is so lucky with the amount of information on the internet. It is crazy. The amount of help you can get and the things that you can learn off the internet. Any job. It can even be like a receptionist or a specific role. If you go onto Google, this beautiful box, and just type like interview questions for this, or how to ace an interview list, you'll get loads of information that you can start learning from and incorporating it into your own style. That's one way. And another thing that I would always say is practice, because I know it's easy for me to say. There's a lot of people that are able to look at information, learn it, memorize it, or like be confident in that. But then how you sort of present yourself in that interview matters as well. That's a huge thing that
Mm-hmm.
interviewers look for: your body language, how you keep yourself, how do you respond to tough questions, etc. And I think practicing, even if it's something as simple as sitting in front of a camera, ask yourself a question and respond as you are being in an interview. And how would you respond? Sit in front of a mirror, practice it. If it's obviously recorded, you can always watch back and look at, oh, did you hesitate? What did you do? Your expressions, or did you think? If you've got family and friends around you, it's something I do with my cousins quite often. Like and it's like they come to one of my cousins, he's a pilot, right? And he's like interviewing to sort of be a pilot, and I'm like, I have no idea what questions they would ask you, but I would randomly throw random questions at him, but also using information from the internet, and we would do an exercise together where, and then we would like, there's been times where a lot of us have sat down together and he will sort of give us responses and we all give him pointers. Actually, you could have answered this like this, or it would have been more good if you said it like this, or you're too relaxed, or you're too serious. Like, you need to show a bit of your personality as well. So I think if you have the ability to practice with other people, great. If not, you practice with yourself, and then, be your own critique and see, if you were on the other side interviewing, would you like that answer? Would you like how that person gave it to you?
I find really annoying overall in candidates, but from more empathetic perspective, people tend to judge themselves a lot more on skills they don't have, and they're
Yeah.
not confident enough to brag about things that they actually did do. Like even when you said, use simple examples from things that you've done outside of work, use simple, it doesn't have to be complex, but a lot of people tend to minimize those as, oh, it's normal. I just ran a 3,000 people charity event for my hometown, but it's nothing. It's just my spare hobby. And I was like, it's still 3,000 people charity events. Like, come on.
Yeah.
And then, but the second they don't know 1% of a job description, was like, oh, I don't think I can do this job. It's like, this doesn't correlate. Come on. We can do better than this.
Women are quicker at saying no to a job or a job description than men, because women look at it as an exercise where they're like, oh, I don't have the skill, oh, I'm not going to apply. Whereas men are like, I don't know that, but I'm still going to apply. I don't know that, I'm still going to apply. It's that confidence as well, right? And I think that's so important in the society to also hone in, and also like, just go for it. Just absolutely go for it. Obviously, don't be silly, as in go for it. Just apply and turn up on the day. Apply. If you get the interview, great. Do your research, practice, and like think about, 100% the simple things, the simple sort of qualities that you've picked up. The interviews that I've had where I've felt like you're so great as a person is where you've just been yourself. Like, I think I struggle to hire people that are fits everything on paper, because I feel like that's great, but you're either just really good at like the skills of the role, which is important, 100%. But what about that cultural piece? Like, how are you going to sort of embed yourself into the team and the culture? And that's also equally important in ensuring. And I know people would say, but I'm getting paid to do my job and not really here to sort of, you know, uh, think about my relationship with other people. People forget that like a lot of our life we spend at work with with our colleagues. Like, majority of our life is spent at work, speaking to the colleagues, the people that you're with. And so if you're not in an environment where you feel seen, heard, and appreciated, your mental health is going to decline massively, and it's all intertwined. And so like a lot of this is important. And so the advice that I give to people most times is like, be yourself. And as much as it is an exercise of them choosing you, it's also an exercise of you deciding, is this the right environment for me? It's a two-way thing. So I think if you if you see it like that and people started viewing it as like, oh, I'm also interviewing them, is that the right fit for me? I think that also changes the dynamic in a lot of people's minds.
You mentioned your community and you being an Indian and being brought up in that. Did your race, your religion ever played any role in your interviews, in your roles? Did you see any negative or positive sides from being from a diverse background?
To be honest, I would say I'm so lucky in that I didn't ever experience a negative connotation because of my cultural background. I think I can see where it can come into play because I've seen it happen. And I think it can come into play where people from backgrounds like myself start questioning themselves, start sort of already deciding in their minds, oh, this is going to be a factor why I'm going to be turned down. This is like already deciding, like, oh, it's they're going to go with this person who's British or who's been born and brought up here. Like, if you already make that decision and go in there, you would sort of talk yourself out of sort of putting your best foot forward. Being from, I think people from different backgrounds, or what they tend to do is they automatically, I can get it, the stigma assigned to it, and they start feeling like it's a bad thing, but actually it's a great thing. You're bilingual, you are more talent, like there's so much more positives. Like, okay, you know, you're bilingual, you have a great way in knowing sort of how to work with people from different backgrounds, you know how to deal with different personalities, different, you're able to accommodate, you're able to sort of come to compromises together. There's a lot of great skills that you pick up that I think people don't give enough attention to. They just think, oh, okay, like I'm not gonna get this. So
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a really bad mentality to have. So I feel like with a lot of things, if it is seen as a stigma in society, what can you do to sort of change that for yourself and change that for the generations that are gonna come after you? Like, and I think it does just have to take a part. Like we have to play a part in it, and we have to sort of change that narrative. And I don't know if I'm just generally a positive person, but I always, no matter what it is, I'll be like, okay, but let me think, okay, fine, it's bad, but how can I change that for my benefit? Or how can I make sure that this is not something my kids or generations after need to suffer? And luckily enough, like so far in my career, I've never been made to feel like, oh, your background or is a disadvantage. In fact, I think people have honed in on it because of how much I've said, like, oh, I deal with people like this. Oh, I know someone who's experienced this. Oh, I know this, because the community is huge and there's so
Mm-hmm.
much that you can bring in and educate other people. So my advice to anyone from sort of a different background is like use it as your strength and own up to it, and then people will start seeing that as an equally important sort of factor to have in a business.
When I came to the UK for the first time, I was extremely conscious about my accent, obviously being Eastern European. To be honest, at the beginning, I came to Scotland, I couldn't understand half of the things Scottish people were saying to me. And I genuinely thought that I just ended up in a place where I'm not going to fit in. The only time that I actually started feeling like home being in the UK and actually feeling accepted by people, it was when I accepted my own differences. That like I say some stupid things and like, yes, English is not my native language. Once in a while, I don't know how to describe things. But you end up like finding a way and just finding some of the most creative ways. And one of the probably some of the funniest conversations in my life was because I said something that I was very confident in, that that's the right way, and then someone just looks at me as like, that's completely opposite of where you were going with this, but okay. And just make a joke out of it. And a lot of the time, when you start accepting that, okay, it's just part of who I am. I talk nonsense once in a while, but I can do that in a couple of languages. So that's already a benefit.
I've also seen a lot of friends that, for instance, are from the Indian background or from another sort of background where they do have accents, and it's a little bit sad for me because I know a friend of mine who is very good at a profession, and he's a really great fitness trainer, and I was like, oh, why don't you start something of your own, like be a personal coach? And he's qualified in everything, and he's like, I don't think I will because I don't think my accent's, good enough. And I'm like, no, like that is, I was like, why? Like that's no way for you to talk out of something. Like, and I think people have this thing in their mind that I need to look a certain way or I need to sound a certain way for me to also be qualified in something. That's absolutely like not it. Not it
Yeah.
absolutely. And I've been at him and I've been like, no, please, like talk
Yeah,
yourself out of that because that's just really bad.
I would much rather listen to every single accent than to some of the people talking absolute crap that they have no knowledge on. So I
For sure.
completely with you on this. Like, encourage all of your friends, encourage yourself. Like, accent, the looks, it doesn't matter. Especially in the nowadays
Absolutely.
society, there's still a lot of idiots who don't know how to accept others. But there's much more of those who support you, but you have to let people to support you. You cannot
Mhm.
close yourself and say, oh, no one supports me if you're not leaving the house. Like, you just make that step, and I promise you there's going to be so many people that you
Yeah.
didn't even know exist and
Yeah.
probably are going through the same issues, probably the same challenges, and they will support you and they probably will be inspired by you. So just make that step, and I hope to see your friend doing the same thing.
Yeah, I know he is making progress. It was initially how he sort of started out. So yeah, for sure. I think yeah, it's difficult and I can get it from their perspective as well, especially when you've
Mhm.
come from a different sort of community and to feel like I'm not going to have a seat at that table because of this. And that's absolutely ridiculous. So everything you said, I'm 100% in support of.
So before we finish, I have a couple more questions. One of them,
Yes.
reflecting on your whole journey, what advice would you give someone aspiring to succeed and be where you are now, being in your role in your career?
Advice I would say is take chances, take risks. Sometimes you might not know that you might not have the right answers of like, okay, I don't think this is the right thing for me. Take the risk, speak to the people on the other side, speak to people that are in that profession and get advice from them, get a feel into sort of their profession and see if that's something that you can see yourself doing as well and push yourself. Like it's all good and well in me saying like, yeah, I've done this, that, the other. But there was a lot of days where I've cried. There's a lot of days where I've put in a lot of work that goes unseen, and a lot of people don't see that. They just see the title on the LinkedIn. Oh, she went from this to this to this. And it's like, you don't know everything, the hard work that came with it. So it's equally important, whatever profession, whatever field you decide to sort of go through, make sure you put in the work, speak to people in that profession, research. The world is at your fingertip. The information is at your fingertip and do the most you can and keep learning is sort of the biggest thing I would say because I think a lot of people stay stuck in their same positions or roles because they get quite comfortable with the role and they're like, oh, this I can continue like this. Comfort is your biggest enemy. Like, if you feel comfortable, have that conversation with your manager and say, hey, pull me in on a bit more challenging things, learn new skills, and keep at it.
How do you ensure that you're personally always learning and always progressing?
So podcasts is one of them. I always like to listen to one at least a couple of times a week. Um, Aside from that, books. I think there's quite a few books that are quite inspirational for me. For the likes of Robin Sharma, Wex King, and there's quite a few like that I really enjoy. That I think motivates me and sort of puts me in the right direction of like, don't give up. Like there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think having those, if you don't have people to do that for you in your life, which I 100% do, but even if you didn't, books are a way in which you can also find that encouragement in life to keep going. That's another way. But aside from that, on a professional point of view, for me personally, I would always keep looking at sort of the trends in the industry, what's happening. I mean, AI has been booming for a long time, and that's something that, and it's important to keep up with the markets because that is something that's going to be the topic of discussion in interviews. It's going to be the topic of discussions in future sort of projects and things. So if you can educate yourself on things that are like prominently important, that's equally important. So whatever's happening in the world, educating yourself with, politics, whatever. And I wouldn't say you have to do absolutely everything. It's just whatever that you think is your niche. And then from a professional setting, yeah, like look into the courses. There are loads of free courses, by the way, online that where you can get a certification at the end of. And if it's not free and if it's something, a skill that you would like to develop, speak to your management about, hey, this is something I'd like to do. Is that something that you have scope for me to sort of pick up and sponsor? If not, can I carve out X amount of time during my work because it will also benefit my work in this way?
Very lastly, how do our listeners can connect with you? LinkedIn, websites, emails. I'll obviously add everything in the description below, but how would you like to be connected?
Professionally, LinkedIn is my LinkedIn will be the best place in where we can connect. If you did want to have a chat about anything, yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in my dancing hobby, not professional in any way, then you can follow
Professional.
it's not professional. You can follow my Instagram dance account as well.
And I'll add all of the links in the description below, but you definitely should follow her dance account. It's quite incredible. And that's one of the things that next time I'm in the same place as this, I'm definitely asking to teach me one. So
yes!
hopefully
we will
she's
do
getting...
one together.
Okay. I'm terrified, but I would love to learn. That's not really my area of expertise, but as you say, we have to learn and grow.
The new things, and you never know, you might be like, oh, I like this and I think I'd like to pursue this as my next challenge.
But anyway, Vis, thank you so much for being here today. I know I took quite a bit of your time, but it was absolutely fantastic not only to speak to you, to hear, and I'm sure our listeners are going to absolutely enjoy all of the advice you've given.
Yeah, it's been fun and I can't wait for us to connect together in person soon.